Oh, it had to update. Just bear with me 1 minute. There we go. Good to go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March East Vincent Township Planning Commission meeting. Please rise for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so thanks for coming, everybody. Before we get into things, there was a submittal, a recent new submittal for the Amherst LLC data center application that we have not yet reviewed, and we were going to schedule a special meeting of the Planning Commission to review that application. So I'm hoping we can look at our calendars if we have them and find a date for that. And also the township calendar. And it needs to be before the 20th.
Yeah.
Right. Of April.
So have we allowed to ask questions about that?
Let's set a date first.
Yeah.
How about the week of the 6th?
Every day should be available except the 7th. Which is the board meeting.
Each of Monday is the Monday, so probably don't want to do that.
9th? 9th is available.
9 works for me, if it works for you. Rachel?
Okay, 9th.
So you're at 7?
And I was remiss. We have a new planning commission member that I would like to welcome, Michelle Adams.
Michelle.
Your interest in and for joining our group. So I'm very happy to have it. So that's gonna happen.
You can't.
Okay. Okay. So there was a question, comment on the on it. You might have to turn the mic on.
There we go. Cindy Ramsey, 116 Penhurst Road. So you're saying it's a new application, so the one that was looked at has been pulled. A new application is in, and then we start all over, time-wise? I mean, there may changes, it's new. If you look at our zoning, it states that's the way it's supposed to work.
It is if I may, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
it is a submittal revision revised plan. It is still under the current application.
And because of all the changes, it's not considered a new plan?
It is.
I mean,
and the
they
board-
waited 2 days
Yes.
before.
Correct. The board they have 60 days to make the determination decision on that.
Whether they have to start over or
No,
whether.
right now, the board has determined that the clock is ticking, so they have set a hearing date on the 20th of April. So you have up to 60 days to review the plan.
So now the board is looking at making a decision at that time, and the conditional use hearing is going to be the 26th.
No.
April
it is
April
April
20th.
April 20th.
So it's not going to be until April 20th, the conditional
That's
use
right,
hearing.
that has been canceled.
Thanks for all of us that listened to all the different confusing things online last night. That's extremely helpful. Sorry to take off at that first thing, but you know that we're all committed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving along. Has everyone gotten a chance to review the minute? Oh, is there, I'm sorry. Come on up.
Need to state my name. Okay, Joanna Tenney, New Street. So I just want clarification because the wording was a little weird. Is it a new application or is it being treated as the old application under revision plans?
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the code here really quick. Cause I thought that if there was revisions made, that it would have to be. See this, listen.
No.
Oh, sorry. No offense.
That's okay. I don't take offense to that.
Okay. So. I just want clarification on that. Cause I thought that if there was revision plans submitted in between. When the application was first started and the conditional use hearing was set. That it would have to be treated as a new plan. Is that,
It doesn't say, I mean, the way the code reads
okay.
is it begins the process.
Mhm.
Then. So the process has begun. Usually you have some ways, so it doesn't have to be right at 60 days.
Right,
You
right.
can do it 20, you can do 30, 40, 50. So the process has begun. So the board has determined that on the 20th, they will reconvene. The hearing.
Right. So I just don't understand then why is it not being explicitly said that it's a new application?
It's not a new application.
But I think,
It's a revision of the plan.
right, but like according to the code, I think it
I
states
don't think it
that.
says that. I think
No?
The code states that, no. And if Haley, you want to read the code?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, cause I don't know, so I'm just.
yeah, I can,
It is confusing sometimes,
is.
so.
I can pull up the code and read it, but I just wanted to add to what Bob was saying. During this time, it is being re-reviewed by our professionals and by the Chester County Planning Commission, and it'll come before the Planning Commission again at the April 9th meeting. So I can, look, just give me a few minutes and I can pull the code.
Okay, let's do our reports and minutes and stuff, and then maybe really look on the answer. Minutes from the February 17th meeting. Did anybody get a chance to read them? Have any comments?
No comment from me.
Damon,
Move that we accept it. Seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and then the engineer's report. Did anybody have any questions or comments on the engineer's report?
I didn't see it. Was it there?
Report.
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't in the folder. That's right.
It wasn't in the folder?
No, just the board of supervisors meeting minutes from February 3rd.
Oh, give me,
Yeah.
well, Mike can go over a couple.
Yeah, I can go over a couple things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. This month, really, we've been looking at a lot of the grant opportunities. So that's one thing that we've been doing is meeting with the different various groups, going through those, see what we can do for the township, and then also prioritize those items. We've looked at a lot of grading plans for Camp Sacanac, who's just making minor revisions to things, looking at some home plans where grading permits and things like that. No real big land developments that I can think off the top of my head. But really the focus we've been doing is trying to align grants and align grant opportunities that exist in the township.
Great, so. How are you coming on the?
I have it pulled up here. I can read that section. It says, should, oh, sorry, I just lost it now. Should the applicant submit new or revised plans for the use subject to conditional use application between the time of original submission and the time set by the Board of Supervisors for a public hearing, the review period shall start anew and prior plans shall be deemed withdrawn.
So that makes it a new plan. I thought they got to
Make a
draw
new
and then make it a new plan.
New plan. It's a new plan.
A new plan, this under the same application. So,
It's considered a new plan.
Correct.
And
yes.
so then the timetable starts all over again.
Which it has.
Which has
That's
started.
correct.
Thank you for clarifying that for those of us who are trying to.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. So for a new business, Natural Lands and our other consultants have been working hard to suggest some revisions to our natural resource protection ordinances. And we're trying to figure out the best way to do this, but Rick, maybe you can give kind of an overview of the changes.
Sure.
And then Haley, if you could bring up the Word document on the screen.
Rick, do you want to maybe take your mic down, down
Sure.
there and pull it up?
And then we'll go through some of the more substantive changes together.
They're kind of out of order, but.
Is this on the website?
Yes. Here, I'll scooch back.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I'm Rick Traley's from Natural Lands. As Rachel said, I am the township planner. This is going to be a little bit challenging. I could not come up with a good way to summarize everything in sort of a neat and tidy format. We've prepared potential amendments to the zoning and the subdivision and land development ordinance. However, in order to make sure that all of the potential amendments actually make sense, I had to go through the entirety of the zoning ordinance and the subdivision and land development ordinance. Natural features has its own dedicated section, but that section sort of plays throughout the ordinances. So just like if you were editing a novel, you can't really just edit one piece. You have to make sure that it still makes sense for the rest of the story. So that means there are lots of little revisions all throughout hundreds of pages of ordinances. So as an overview, though, I looked at the definitions sections in both ordinances, took revisions that Michelle Adams, who's over there on the Planning Commission now, and John Hosbach, the township arborist, as well as staff members and other consultants had recommended. I made sure that the new and existing definitions were consistent between ordinances. You don't want your zoning definitions to define something one way and your other ordinance define it differently. So we made sure those were consistent. We removed some existing definitions and replaced them with more sort of current definitions, some that are better aligned with DEP's current definitions, especially those definitions that were related to water or wetlands, riparian buffers, flooding, etc. I looked closely at the natural features section of the zoning ordinance. I believe that's Article 15 of zoning. Michelle had done a lot of work on that section already. She had pulled material from Kennett Township's ordinance. But again, we had to make sure that their ordinance would work within the context of East Vincent's ordinances. So those updates provided greater protection for steep slopes, for wetlands, for riparian buffers, and for woodlands. The township arborist, John Hosbach, spent a lot of time writing new and really good, really thorough, in-depth standards for protecting woodlands. I took his few pages of standards, basically had to take them apart and put them back together as working ordinances. And those standards now as ordinances do a much better job than what's in place now. They will do a better job at one, protecting existing forests, and two, requiring replacement trees where forests can be removed. And that whole section also came with a whole slew of new definitions, revised definitions, and making sure definitions were consistent. So that is sort of the overview of everything. As I said, it's a lot of details to go through. So I'll sort of let the planning commission lead how you want to go through this process. If there's big picture items you want to discuss, if there's questions, if you want to try to go through it line by line, change by change, we can do it however you'd like.
I think that it would be good to go through section by section rather than line by line. And then we can just kind of point out some of the bigger things in each section. We'll be able to control that from up here. Just like, can't see either.
Is there a cord long?
I don't think that's going to be long enough.
So the first section is the definition. Did anybody have any comments on that?
Hold on, Rick, we might be onto something.
What?
Whether this is going to load the ordinance. I do.
Reading the definitions and zoning, the lines of the definitions and style though, if there was some.
Oh, thanks.
Is that it? Overlaid as a item. We can certainly do that. Rick, are there any high level things about definition you want to share that you were thinking about when you were doing them? Things that you wanted to make sure were in there that weren't previously in there? Or that weren't aligning between Saldo and zoning?
A lot of it was related to, like I said, water resources, getting up to date with DEP. But we can, if you're following along on a laptop, I think the best way to follow is make sure you have track changes turned on. And just then use the previous and next buttons. So we can just kind of scroll through and see what jumps out at everyone.
Yeah.
So first, like I said, Michelle had provided, sorry,
I'm gonna turn you on.
thank you. Michelle had provided some recommendations regarding 100-year flood. I recommended some changes about the definition of erosion. Next, added a definition for alluvial soils. In some cases where I added new definitions, I took them from other communities that I'm familiar with. Many came from East Coventry Township, your neighbors. I noticed that I made a note that we should define developable land, but I never actually went back and defined it. So I'll have to come back to that. I know there are some other things that already need to be revised per some comments from the township arborist. Again, some minor changes to erosion, added definitions about farmland of statewide importance, because I believe the new sections about natural resources make note of farmland of statewide importance and prime agricultural soil. Here too, you can see a new definition of floodplain, replacing the old one. It's simpler. It aligns with what DEP uses. A new definition of floodway, which was not in the zoning previously.
I was wondering if those, I know you went and compared the zoning definitions with the Saldo, but did you also go into that chapter 8 flood hazard zone and look at those definitions?
That's a standalone ordinance. Chapter 8 or
it's chapter 8 in the zoning, isn't it?
oh, I do remember this. I think I did take a look at it. It has, I think, a handful of definitions sort of in line with the ordinance.
I think so.
I'm gonna make a note to double check that.
One of my comments was actually, would it make more sense to just take that and put it into this? So that all of the natural features protections are in one section. Because, I mean, we can get to that later, but it
Okay,
just feels like. We've got one little paragraph in this referring to that section, but we could just. Put the whole thing in,
gotcha.
and then it wouldn't have to have its own set of definitions too.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the reasoning was. to put definitions only in that chapter and not just add them here.
I think it's a sensible idea that Rachel has, because these things are so disparate and disjointed. I think it'd be good to have it consolidated in one place.
Could you repeat it, Rachel?
We have this separate section, chapter 8, the flood hazard district. And my thought was, when we're in this chapter, in the zoning ordinance where we're talking about natural features preservation. We have a paragraph that talks about the flood hazard zone and it refers you to that chapter. But my comment was maybe you could take that whole chapter and move it into this one so that all the natural features protection standards are together. I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay. Should we keep going with definitions?
Yep.
Floodplain, floodway. I suggested modifying the definition of existing grade so that it is related to an actual application. So the new definition would read the elevation relative to a given datum of the ground surface at the time of any application for permits, land development, zoning changes, or other approvals to be considered by the township. So that this sort of is just trying to pin down existing features to the moment that a developer submits a plan.
I might have a caveat to that.
Okay.
I will say the only thing that gives me a little pause on that is that we experience a lot of situations where residents may or may not have gotten permits and changed grade. So what we have done in the past is had to look at what has been occurred over time, and then things that have been permitted kind of it can be established, but if they're not permitted, then we have gone back to a previous time. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it sounds like we're trying to get to the same issue.
Right. But just to be careful, because if careful on how
Yeah.
you do it.
Yeah, I'm making a note to think about the wording.
I mean, and when we talk about developments, I think your wording is perfect when you talk, so it's all about what the goal of the ordinance piece and the definition is.
Right. And I should say, Rachel and I were talking about this a little bit before the meeting too, that right now we're talking about the zoning ordinance, and technically everything that's in the zoning ordinance is supposed to apply to everyone, not just developers. Putting requirements in the zoning ordinance makes it harder for a developer to sort of work their way around requirements. But it also, again, is supposed to apply to everyone. So then it's up to the township. How much do you want to enforce all of these requirements on everyone? You can leave so much of this in zoning and say that makes it easier for us to enforce against developers. And, you know, you don't have to actively go out looking for issues out just for average citizens. But we're talking about the zoning ordinance, and that's really what the zoning ordinance is supposed to do. It protects you a little bit better too, because you know, I'm not speaking about this planning commission and this current board, but a future board or a future planning commission may not be as environmentally conscious as this one. And by putting things in zoning, it takes it out of their hands and puts it into the hands of the zoning hearing board, who are supposed to be somewhat independent of the supervisors. So that's a little aside about the difference between zoning and subdivision that is important to keep sort of in the backs of our minds as we go through this. All right, I'm going to keep moving through the definitions then.
Just to clarify with the zoning, and it applies to everyone, but existing conditions on residence parcels, unless there's something like Mike brought up where they did something that should have had a permit they didn't, are essentially grandfathered. It's not like everyone has to
Right,
comply to this, just so the public understands.
right.
Yeah, I mean, and Michelle, what we see the most is, and I'm sure you're aware of, is the whole cumulative stormwater since 2014 is one of the most famous ones, right? So if you've done an improvement since 2014, then they become cumulative. So if you established a plan in 2026 here and you showed your site, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what the stormwater should be on. So just to be completely clear to everyone else. Yeah.
All right, the next new definition we come to is heritage tree, and this definition did come from the township arborist. Rachel and I were talking before the meeting again about, do we actually need definitions for both heritage tree and specimen tree? So I'm going to talk to the arborist about whether we can combine those two definitions to simplify this. Next, I updated the abbreviations for a few of the soils. I ran into this issue in East Coventry Township. They had the same issue. Their soils abbreviations are not up to date with the current resources that we and developers use to create their maps and for us to review plans. So if we have certain requirements and the ordinance says this outdated abbreviation, and then they look at a soil survey, a modern soil survey that has a different abbreviation, they say, oh, that's not the soil that's in your ordinance. We don't have to follow those requirements. So we just want to make sure those are up to date. Similarly, we've defined hydrologic soil classification. This is, I believe, a USDA NRCS definition. I also added a phrase to impervious cover, and I did want to run this one by the commission. Sort of a small change, but maybe important. You see in red what I added, any surface area which, and then I've added, precludes or reduces stormwater infiltration and groundwater recharge, or does not absorb precipitation or runoff. And really the question I want to pose to you is an in-ground pool impervious surface? It doesn't allow water to get into the ground and recharge, but it also doesn't.
Water take up with the pool.
I think that we've considered them impervious.
It doesn't get into the groundwater.
So it goes either way. From the industry side, you see townships that'll say they're actually detention basins because they hold back 6 inches of water, or they don't actually run off, right? So water doesn't run off of them because usually the pool has a lip. But eventually when the pool overfills, it gets discharged to the ground and so on. But it is a fun one. I smiled because as soon as you said it, because it's some municipalities look at it completely different. The pool itself is not, the water surface itself is considered pervious, but the coping and everything else is impervious. So it's all where you guys want to be on it.
Like, how does it hold 6 inches of water? Unless you get your pool down.
Well,
Most people have it full, right?
I don't know, right? I've never gotten a pool that's completely full, but like there's that little gap there. But either way, it doesn't run off. So we've heard people argue about water doesn't run off it either. So it doesn't create runoff. But
A threshold where you have to do stormwater, is the threshold 1,000 or 5,000? Do we have a threshold?
The $9.99.
yeah, it's the 1,000.
1,000.
Yes.
Because I was thinking, who cares about the pool either way, but all the stuff around the pool, the deck. And so if somebody were putting in a pool, you want to take care of the deck and all the stuff that goes with the pool, and you might fall under that number. I don't know.
With the pool, you're definitely in it, right? Nobody's
You're definitely in it.
right. Without the pool, you can be on the border of it.
Yeah, maybe not have to do anything.
Yes, and then You know, and then pool surfaces you can look at differently, and there's also, I believe your ordinance has a provision in it where the definition also refers to if it's part of a BMP. Does that one have this?
The long definition.
Yeah, so sometimes you can also, like, permeable surfaces can be deemed permeable, concrete permeable asphalt can be deemed porous and pervious as long as it's the part of it designed to be MP. I've seen those caveats added to it as well. So if you just add stone and slope the bottom, then no, it's impervious. But if you flatten the bottom and make it an actual BMP, then they let you call it pervious. Those are the couple ones that I've seen around that are interesting.
So I think the only concern I have with the language that's here is reduces. So what about a gravel path? You know, some people have very large properties and they have to have a path between their barn and their house or whatever. Does gravel reduce permeability? Depends on the size of the gravel.
Who
Who judges it?
Well, unfortunately, I think that would be your consultants and staff. That would be the judge of it. And usually it comes from a complaint or from an event, right? So if there's a runoff event downstream, you start to look and see what has been implied. But I think again, where you get into the philosophical difference of it's not so much the gravel, it's the compaction of the gravel. Right, when that gravel gets compacted and everything else, and you can compact soil the same way, and you can get into the same disagreements about it. But yes, it does reduce runoff, right, just by reducing area. But it promotes it better than asphalt. So there's that. You know, it's a judgment call. So I think that's what Rick's asking is, where do you guys stand on it? Where do you want to be on that one?
And honestly, it's a very small part of the ordinance. We don't have to take a half hour on it.
Well, there's a small part of the ordinance, but if you're a citizen putting in a new house and someone says, no, your gravel paths, as an example, or your pool, as an example, or your raised flower beds, as an example, and the paths between them are impervious, it takes them over a limit and they could be into tens of thousands of dollars of stormwater management for no good reason. So I think this needs to be tight. It's a small part of the ordinance, but it's got tremendous implications for citizens.
Yeah, I think that again, it's up to your commission to go through. There's an amount that wouldn't push you into excess, and then you can take excess from it. And I think that there's a fine line from that. If a homeowner needs a 10-foot pad to do something, then that's one thing. If you're paving a road to your rear or your property with gravel, then that's a different. So I think that there's a caveat to it.
Maybe when we get to Saldo and the stormwater ordinance, we could lift from some other places that, for instance, Lawson in the city of Philadelphia, they've got very clear definitions of what's pervious pavement, what's green roof, and you get, quote, get out of jail free cards for those things versus a compacted gravel pad the trucks park on that's choked with, you know what I mean?
So
I think we could lift from other, Saldo and avoid the situation.
Okay.
you're identifying.
Fair.
my only concern there is when you really do go through a grading permit process, Saldo does not apply to a grading permit.
That is true. That is true.
So those provisions, you'd be removing those pieces and moving those pieces to a developer. You'd be allowing your homeowners, to the point about what are you conflicting on your homeowners versus your developers. By removing it and putting it all in Saldo, you're removing the effectiveness of that on your homeowners.
Can we add guidance to a grading permit application?
Yes, absolutely.
That would be clear for homeowners and not too complicated.
I think we're gonna be here all night if we go through one of these individually.
I'll turn my mic off.
No, it's
Maybe just go through all the red lines and see if anyone wants to stop. Not just have an explanation.
Sure.
About that.
That's fine, but I will bring up if like I need, this was one that I really did want you all the way in. All right. This is another one that I do want to mention. I added a definition for a managed meadow. And this comes into play, especially for your open space option. Too many developers, HOAs, even regular citizens just think, I'll call it a meadow, nature can do its thing, I don't have to take care of it. But we know that when we don't take care of our natural resources, they ultimately fail as well. So when you're dealing with developers, we don't want them to just say, we're gonna let the open space grow into a meadow. We want their meadows to be something defined. Something that we have some control over what they're actually proposing, how they maintain it, how they install it.
But that's nowhere in the ordinance yet, right? It's just a,
Right.
yeah.
So this is possibly a precursor. I did also share as an attachment, an open space management ordinance section.
Rick, maybe we could just say that change, so you're suggesting change the whole meadow definition to what you have here. And maybe we just add an area intentionally managed from, maybe it's fine like it is, but make it clear that it's managed is your point. I think
Right.
that's really important, especially with nuisance issues and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I don't think, can you hear me? I don't think a meadow has to be mowed and.
Not necessarily, but it has to be maintained.
Yes, we
Somehow.
maintain, but you, like I know down at Longwood Gardens, they have the meadow area and they mow or during only a third of the year.
Mhm.
So,
We could tweak that to still require maintenance, but maybe not as specific as mowed annually. I get your point there.
And so how would that, like, it's pretty close to the definition of meadow. Would it supplant the definition of meadow that's already in there?
I wouldn't think so. Because again, it's sort of the difference between a private citizen who does just let their property grow into a meadow without really maintaining it. They can, it's their right to do that, as long as it doesn't run afoul of your property maintenance ordinances. So I would think you would still want two definitions, and I haven't read your property maintenance ordinances. I haven't read your entire code book, but I am curious if the word meadow appears in any of those other ordinances.
Not yet. Not yet.
well, we do have a nuisance yard
Yes.
and meadow appears in. But, and so maybe it might be good to have the word managed meadow because you have to describe what that.
I agree.
All right. Thank you. Native species, we all want to encourage those, but we should define it. And I don't want to get into this one, even at natural lands where we all agree we need to plant native plants. There's huge disagreements on what is native. So if we want to debate this one by email or something, we can. Similarly, we've added a definition for noxious vegetation. And this again is sort of a precursor for open space management. If you want to tell developers in HOA, you want them to manage their non-native troublesome species, we have to define them and tell them what that is. Okay, prime farmland soils, I mentioned this earlier. This again is a definition from the USDA. I had to tweak the definition of registered landscape architect. Okay, this is one that I do think needs a little bit of discussion. I feel like, so in riparian buffer areas, your current definition has this first paragraph, which is more truly a definition. And then the next two sections are sort of describing what has to be done or created. And I'm not really sure if A and B, the differentiation of the two zones and what should be created is, should really stay in definitions. Or if it should just be in the body of the ordinance that describes what needs to be included in a riparian buffer, primarily in an application.
I agreed. I thought it should go.
Okay,
Makes sense.
great. We will keep moving then. Seasonally high water table was a definition I took from East Coventry that I thought would be good to define. Similarly, the definition of selective cutting. I don't recall if I found a reference to it in your ordinance or I just took it from East Coventry, but either way, I want to talk to the township arborist about it. All right, if we keep moving, I added a definition of site analysis because as it is, your ordinance does include four-step design process, including a site analysis, but it's not defined. And I see too many applicants come in just with an existing features plan and say, this is my site analysis, but that's not really what a site analysis is. And then another sort of preference, minor argument with potential major implications. Should the definition of slope include man-made slopes? So are we just talking about naturally occurring slopes? We're updating the ordinance to use slopes as, or to protect slopes in a way that would limit their disturbance or development. So I added in here, regardless of whether they are naturally occurring or human-made, arguments can go either way.
From arguments I've seen here, you tend to not care about man-made slopes.
And I think where we landed maybe was that if the slope has become wooded since it's been, you know, graded by humans, that woodland would then be protected. So that maybe that sort of layering of the natural features protected would protect the slopes we want to be protected in real life.
They could send someone to a zoning variance for just this issue, which can be burdensome.
Okay, it sounds like this comes out then.
But if it comes out, then it leaves the question open of whether a man-made slope counts as a slope. So do we want to say man-made slopes don't count?
Madam Chair, I'll pose this to the two consultants there. How do you, let's just say a man-made slope, you don't know if it was made or not 20 years ago. And let's say you have the questions, you know, it's become wooded now, it becomes a forest. How do you go back and say, you know, that was man-made 20 years ago? How do you know, and what specific fact? Should we not make that clear? I mean, tighter so that, you know, if it's become that way, it's considered, you know, natural. It's considered.
Sort of investigation, it's sort of like, you know, the state change between the fill and the natives. Maybe with the terms. Man-made and not.
Sounds like we're making it very complicated.
Right.
Soil
Mhm.
where it's
In-
determined that.
At that point, it might be easier to get the
wooded.
variance, right?
Yeah, I just think you want to make sure and treat that as though that if it's become wooded, it's forested. Now to say, you know, that's what it is, it's natural.
Yeah, I
That's
think,
just my opinion on it.
I think what we've done, and I think you've seen other municipalities in the past that say, if you can produce a permit that created them. If you can produce a plan or an engineered plan that created them, then that becomes a man-made slope. But other than that, without producing that plan that created them, then they, and if they're vegetated, then they're natural. And you could always go get that variance with that interpretation, but that municipality, which Bob, you know well, that's what they require, right?
Do you have to specify that those part of your code that, you know, it's actually in there to say that's, so there's not like a mystery to someone coming in. Here's what we need.
Yeah, you could put it as to the discretion of the zoning officer, man-made to the discretion of the zoning officer. That way it's not saying per permit or vice versa, but then you'd put it back to the zoning officer or the consultants to make that decision.
You know,
That's what it
I
should
know
be.
that. What if you have
I would think
I know we don't now, what if you end up with the soft consultants and soft zoning officers, whatever? You know, then, you know, it's open. So I think you
Your
want,
call.
that one, we want to tighten down because we have an example that, you know, working through is. You want to leave that to someone and say, yeah, I can find it for that.
Yeah, the irony is that that's not actually in the code in Radnor, but yet it's enforced that way, right? So the irony is you have the strong stuff, you know, because that's what they do. That's how they enforce it, even though that's not what's written. So,
But
yeah.
that goes to where, you know, you've got someone who's, they're strong, but I'm saying Haley isn't because I know how she'll enforce it, but. You know, if you're not there and you don't have that, then,
Yeah.
you know, someone says, it's easier just to say, it's not.
Maybe we leave the definition to include man-made slopes, but when we get to the area of allowed slope disturbance, I can't remember what the recommendations were.
Yeah.
The numbers represent that you're not gonna be making undue hardship or a small property owner
Sure.
without sending a small property owner to a zoning
Understand.
violation. That might be a way to deal with it, I don't know.
All right, we'll tweak this definition a little bit per all of the comments. And see where we get to in the natural features protection sections.
Yeah. Just to add, so that's exactly what Tradifferent does. Tradifferent says you are not, you can limit your percentage of disturbance of naturally occurring slopes. That way they add the word naturally occurring to the disturbance section. So that way, and they make a distinction between naturally and man-made in the definition. So that way they are allowed to disturb man-made. As long as but they're not allowed to disturb trees on man-made slopes. Trees on man-made slopes are prohibited in Tradifferent.
Does this tie back then to stormwater management?
Not
Because you
really.
can't disturb them, I mean, should there be a reference or a link back to stormwater management?
Could.
Should not create problem for surrounding property.
Right, I was just saying the way to solve this one could be in your disturbance areas, you're allowed to disturb. You're not allowed to disturb naturally occurring, you can disturb man-made, but also protect the vegetation that's on it. In that other section.
The good part of not having updated our ordinances in such a long time is we have all these wonderful precedents. Right? Somebody else did the work.
Yeah.
What's up, Monica?
Monica Scriber, Valley Creek Lane. Is there going to be a difference between somebody who gets a permit to disturb a natural slope versus somebody who's just going to go out because it's man-made and do something? Is the end result going to be different?
Yes. Yes,
It should be.
yes, if they were trying to get a permit to do a naturally occurring slope, then they would be prohibited by these code sections of disturbing them all. There's a provision, like they can disturb a certain amount, I believe, but not all of them.
But they can just go out and level a man-made slope.
With a permit still, but yes, they could level a man-made slope if this definition, the way this definition is playing out, we'd be setting the ground rules for how they could do.
That's my question, because what it sounds like to me is, you just said you can disturb a man-made slope, but if there's a particular area in our township right now, the man-made slopes literally they look like natural slopes down into a company. So
they're wooded, Monica. I think that was.
no, they're not wooded. They're people, their homes, the homes are sitting up from where the slopes are. So this is, I think.
I see what you're saying, like all these developments, the earth has all been moved, everything is man-made.
It's tricky because you can have a big impact on man-made slopes that somebody just said, can't they just, if it's man-made or not, to have to go back in and, how record keeping is sometimes. You know, you may never find that permit that it was man-made.
Right.
So is there any harm in treating slopes as slopes? Do we have to slice that hair?
I mean, obviously, it's the planning commission's decision to do that. I would think I'd say is that I've seen developments where it's just a quick 3-to-1 slope for 5 feet down to your mailbox, and somebody wants to level that off. Technically, they would not be allowed to do that. They would need to go to get variance to do that, just for kind of, you know, but then the other side is what you're describing. And if that's a situation, please let me know. I will drive by and see what you're referring to. But the series of grades and so on, even if they wanted to disturb it, I'm not sure how they could without retaining walls and things like that.
Right, that's what my concern is like.
You're
we need to
replacing
be
them.
Clear, if it's a slope, whether it was man-made or not, because as Bob pointed out, depending on when that was done, that could be fully established, and like Rachel pointed out, if it's wooded, then it's part of our landscape now, whether it was man-made or not.
Right.
And I think even if it's a grassy knoll, if that grass is still retaining, I mean, if we start messing with that, it could be, if we make it different, I guess is what I'm saying, but maybe I don't understand it. I just wanted to clarify that I think a slope is a slope is a slope.
Okay, and then maybe
They're structural, right? For instance, we can have slopes that are structural, that are.
absolutely.
Like in a retaining.
Yeah, yes, you can have earthen embankments and so.
Right.
But maybe to Monica's point, maybe it's more of a disturbance threshold. You know, if you're disturbing 500 square feet of them, first you're disturbing acres of them, then maybe there's some kind of threshold where, so if somebody just wants to put in, you know, move their garage over a little bit and they have to put in a little slope for that versus the opposite. So maybe there's a threshold thing about the amount you're doing.
Be a really good way, because then you wouldn't put a homeowner trying to do something into a zoning variance with a legal hearing, but you would avoid any major changes.
Right.
To man-made steep slopes without a variance.
There's gotta be something that is tied to stormwater management. Because again, you don't wanna push water on somebody else's property and then all of a sudden then you're creating this trickle down effect, no pun intended. But you're gonna create other issues, and then this neighbor starts to correct their property, and then you've got one giant mess.
Yeah, I mean, creating steep slopes is almost worse, because like you said, you're creating more conditions for erosion. You know, it's really hard to get the grass to grow on them and so on. Established steep slopes, man-made or not, are much better off than anything being built, so.
Maybe we should just leave that, not mention steep slopes, just leave it slopes, and then that can be decided with a specific plan.
Well, don't we have a definition of what these slope is?
You mean man-made or
Percentage.
It's up there on the screen. We have steep slope areas, which is over 15%, and very steep slope areas over 20.
No, I mean, leave the man-made stuff just out completely, but not even mention it. So that when someone comes in and they have a slope they want to disturb, and they say, well, it's man-made, it's not important, that would be determined by the township.
And that's where we landed, right? Taking out that clause about.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So we don't need to be discussing.
Pretty slow. Yeah, makes sense.
So next we get to specimen vegetation. I made some tweaks, referring this to the township arborist instead of to a landscape architect. And included a new line from John about defining a specimen tree as 24 inches or greater. And again, I want to talk to him about combining this with heritage tree.
If we add that line, then that would kind of negate that whole chart, which I would like to negate the whole chart. Because it just seems very specific for each kind of tree, what qualifies as a specimen tree?
So I had a similar feeling, but also a question, because you see there is one species in here, sassafras, listed as only 20 inches, and sassafras is a smaller tree. So this is one that I would want to ask John about. Do we need the chart, especially when we combine it with heritage tree?
So I didn't understand the chart. You're saying since some trees don't get very big, that maybe the sassafras tree of 20 inches is an old tree.
Right. Exactly, yeah. So added a definition for spring, which I believe came from Michelle. Updated the stream definition again, from Michelle.
And I think these are sourced from Stroud, I recall.
Got it. In your definition of trail, similar to riparian buffers, I think you take out the rules about trails. That doesn't really belong in a definition. Next, I added a comment about permanent vegetation versus temporary vegetation. I think this has to do with vegetation being used during construction, but I'm not sure if the ordinance needs a differentiation or not. And it may not even be anything we need to even change.
I agree with you. I don't know. What's permanent versus temporary, does that matter?
Totally grass tops of pile, 15 feet high, feet from the road, no, that's what they mean in terms of temporary vegetation.
Well, I see you're saying the lack of cover.
Right. So
They do.
I don't think there's any harm in leaving it. I think this was more of a note to me. And then replace a couple definitions again, from Michelle's recommendations. Watercourse and wetland delineation. Wetland delineation, actually, I know that I updated, to make sure to include the requirements for who actually does the wetland delineation.
Makes sense.
Do you have a preference of who you want to do?
So actually, if you have a preference, I would ask you, because I did not, every reference I found to who should do it was sort of generic and said a qualified professional such as, and then the such as's were hydrologist, maybe it was arborist, it was just sort of,
Yeah.
there was no clear, no clear suggestion.
Yeah, we can come up with those. I think that there's registered soil scientists or, but those can vary from sanitary to storm to vice versa, to everything. And then there are wetland specialists, and I'm trying to think of, aren't they USAC registered?
That's what I was just looking up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like they're Army Corps specialized.
but they're, and that's what we want. We
Right,
them
we want
to
that.
adhere to that.
But I
don't
do,
know if that necessarily negates somebody else, like if you're not, I don't know.
but I think the reason it's qualified so that we can deem them qualified or not. But we definitely want it to be the burden of the applicant. I don't think it's something that like a township consultant entering a property and deeming wetlands or not wetlands is a slippery slope legally. So I think it has to be the applicant, but we just have to come up with qualified. So we could do that research together, figure out what those agencies would be.
Right.
But I think that's why it is purposefully vague, but we can come up with that.
Okay, that works for me. The township arborist prepared new definition for woodlands and also provided woodland classifications. And this reminds me, I know that in different parts of the ordinance, I used the term grade and class interchangeably, and I need to fix that. The arborist prefers the word grade. So this is the start of better protecting your woodlands by really requiring developers to get in there, see what's in there, and grade the woodlands, determine if it's a grade 1, a really high value woodland, a 2, a moderate, or a 3, a low value woodland. And later in the ordinance, these definitions play into how much of those woodlands are permitted to be removed.
Well, these are good.
I think so. I think John did a really good job with these. I think they're very good.
Over what's there now.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah. So then we get finally out of definitions.
Hooray.
I know this takes a long time.
This is only an hour.
It just does. So again, updating your soils here in your AP district. This is the same thing as before. Just updating the abbreviations. Then we jump into, now the next revision is section 27906 in your open space designation and management standards. I don't know that we need to go into all of these right now, but some of these sections of what you have in place right now, I think can be improved, but it's going to be more of a bigger picture overhaul if you wanted to do it. So I just called out a few things with comments, like this section that's highlighted right now, to me, looks like it permits a lot of wet and steep areas to be open space. And that's the kind of places that are considered leftovers by a developer, and the public can't really use them very well. It's not real good usable open space.
I agree entirely, and also I would like to see stormwater basins taken out of open space. I don't know where that is. But this is not definition of zoning.
No.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you look at the open space and it's just, it's not any different than it would have been beforehand.
So this,
They just can't build it, so that's the open space.
Yeah.
This is in the conservation and development design standards. So that relates to any development that's going to have open space as part of it, right?
Right.
So why isn't this in Saldo? Just out of curiosity.
That's a good question. So, our charge now is sort of
Space.
get your protection standards
Space requirements.
up to a better place sort of quickly. If we want to address something like this, it's going to be a bigger overhaul.
I think they're in the zoning code because open space is required by zoning. So you have to define it, or, so you have to set the provisions for it because the zoning ordinance requires you to put it in place. You could put the zoning provision to say, see Saldo, and then handle it there. But that's why I think it does have to say something in the zoning code about it. Even if you just refer to the Saldo section. I'm doing my best Joe impression.
All right, so we'll keep moving. That's, like I said, commentary.
good question for,
Mhm.
before we move on, Rick, assuming we're coming back to this in some, because I don't know our open space standards, do they require the open space to be contiguous and publicly accessible? Because most of what I've seen that's in open space is people's backyards now.
I don't actually recall.
Okay, yeah.
This project has had me read your ordinances pretty thoroughly, but I haven't gotten a new residential development through the planning commission for me to really apply them yet, to know all of those standards by heart yet.
I appreciate the effort behind just definitions. If it took us an hour, it only took us an hour because of all the work, so thank you.
All right, so we'll keep moving. Whoops.
And the idea is that we'll look at this another day. Like you flagged that thing in 27906A1, 1A1. About the junk open space.
Yeah, if the commission and the township wishes to try to do more at a later date, like I said, it would be
Yeah.
the bigger thing, the bigger
Right.
lift. So now we finally get to the actual natural features conservation section. And again, thanks to Michelle, who did a lot of work before it was handed to me. So some of this was just dropping in her work. And I know that she pulled sections from Kennett Township and probably other places too. So Michelle, do feel free to jump in at any time if you'd like.
And maybe we should all be grateful for this is one thing to be grateful about the data center coming in because it forced us to look at this. This was done in such a world and not advocating for the data center, just saying it forced us to look at something. Yeah.
So now we're in your existing natural features conservation section, part 15. Excuse me, but previously you had no purpose statement. Michelle dropped in this purpose statement that came from the county draft recommendations.
I'm so glad you need a purpose section.
Agreed. Then we get right back into steep slope conservation. Your existing ordinance has a purpose statement, but then didn't have much in the way of real teeth of an ordinance to actually protect anything. So this new approach is going to delineate the two categories of steep slopes, moderately steep and very steep, as we defined previously. Steep slopes preserved wherever possible, which is sort of the light language. But then the real teeth is that moderately steep slopes, which are those greater than 15%, can't be disturbed. More than 30% of them may not be disturbed. And for very steep slopes, those are your slopes over 25%. Only 15% of such slopes can be disturbed.
And this is where we were talking about having some kind of like minimum square footage that would trigger it so that like a small homeowner project wouldn't be subject to these standards. Is that where it would go? You think?
Or maybe it could go here, or it could go in a grading permit application.
In the grading.
Yeah.
Mike and I can talk about that more outside of the meeting. So, lots more sort of plan requirements, what they have to show, what they have to do.
I think I have a comment, but I couldn't find my notes, but I remember a lot of places it says, well, avoid disturbing if at all possible. So that to me is so vague and
Yeah.
can't that be?
Yeah. The always famous to the greatest extent possible,
Yeah.
right? That's probably what it says.
Yeah. So your ordinance does say that, but then it backs it up with real percentages. So, it doesn't hurt to leave it in there.
Oh, okay, so
Because-
when I see that somewhere else, it's backed up with. If we add this. If we
Right.
add-
Right.
okay.
So I think we can move on to wetlands and wetland buffer protection standards. Again, this is from the county draft. Basically protects wetlands 100%. Again, wetland delineation has to be done, conducted by a qualified. Here we get more into a short list of who may be qualified. Qualified wetland biologist, soil scientist, or an environmental professional with demonstrated qualifications. And again, Mike and I can talk about that, whether that's adequate or we need something more.
What do we think of the 20% wetland buffer disturbance? I remember we talked about that before.
Yeah, these numbers are just.
And the issue was that could be really restrictive, right?
Well, But this is an area that doesn't have good protection under DEP's rules, so. Right, like you're not allowed to disturb the wetlands, but wetland buffers, unless they're stream riparian buffers, there's a rule, but wetland buffers aren't necessarily covered.
No,
Yeah.
wetland buffers are not covered. They used to be covered by watersheds if you adopted watersheds, but really it mattered if the township took the wetland buffers.
So it's on us to have some wetland buffer protection, so. You're not allowed to have any EVHQ riparian buffer disturbance under DEP rules without following the buffer mitigation stuff, if I'm right.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that for wetlands, it's all on us.
Correct. So is 20% reasonable?
I mean, the wetlands are really important.
Oh, absolutely, that's why.
Buffer.
Yeah. Oh, this is just.
I don't remember where this came from, if it was from Willistown or the county or,
At the heading here, it said it's from the county.
okay,
So assuming that carries all the way down.
because I was plagiarizing freely.
Maybe it came from watersheds though.
It could have. I pulled a bit from Willistown and Kennett because they had strong environmental.
And this pertains to all new construction, correct, or new improvements? So to me, I would think that we would want to be as restrictive as possible.
Well, does this, suppose a resident has wetlands on their property? This refers to that too, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they want to build something or regrade something, yeah.
20% seems reasonable, because it could allow you to sort of like encroach a little bit if you had to, but not, you'd still have to really respect the buffer. How wide is the buffer? 50
50
feet.
feet.
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
See that or nothing, I mean, 20% is fine.
Okay, let's keep moving then.
Do you want us to ask questions in between or wait till the end?
I don't want to get a ton of questions going, because this is taking longer than anticipated. But if you've got like a really burning thing that can't
Right,
wait.
do you want me to come say my name again? I'm very confused by this, the buffer, the feet. Monica Scriber, Valley Creek Lane. What did it used to be 150 or is
That's
it?
for the streets.
This is for wetlands.
This is for wetlands.
So has it always been 50? And DEP is what, Michelle?
DEP doesn't have any buffer protection for wetlands. It's up to the township.
So doesn't 50, that doesn't sound like enough to me.
Well, I kind of agree with you, like I saw it on the plan that came in, the feet around the wetlands, it doesn't seem like very enough either, because the wetlands shouldn't be disturbed like they.
There are filtration,
Like in
right?
Florida, they took away.
What if we halved it from along the creeks? What if we say 75?
I don't know.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
We can, like Michelle said, and Bob, we can always be more stringent.
How about this, since I don't know that any of us really have the answer to that tonight, I'm gonna make a note. See if we can find a precedent for a bigger wetland buffer, run it by the solicitor, see if we're starting to get into overdoing it, that's gonna get an ordinance repealed or the township sued,
Well,
and we can go from there.
the reason I'm bringing it up is this is Spring City
Yeah,
and the road I live on, I swear to God, there is a spring, wherever they build a house, they decided we're gonna put a house on this spring to cover it up. Because we have water coming out of everywhere. And so if our wetlands weren't mitigated, maybe we wouldn't have the water issues we have. So we have a lot of wetlands here. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration when we're looking at this. It just has to.
Mhm.
Just because this is the lay of the land, right? This is the demographic. There's no hiding it. And look what happens when you do try to hide it. Thank you.
You know, the downside is homeowners, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it would be good to see what other. Yeah, but.
And again, this ordinance does, again, with the different grades of woodland, a grade 1 woodland, I think includes anything that's in a riparian buffer. It may also include anything in a wetland buffer. So again, if it's wooded on top of a resource, it protects it more strongly too, but I know they won't all be wooded. All right. So again, we are into forests, hedgerows, individual trees, heritage trees, specimen vegetation. This all came from the township arborist, and I just had to take it apart and make it into an ordinance. So here in zoning, it lays out establishing the grades of the forest, really assessing the quality of the woodlands. I don't want to read all of this line by line. Did anybody have questions or concerns about any of the woodland evaluation sections?
It's all essentially what's been developed by John. You just put it in the format to fit in our code.
Correct.
Yeah.
Under C evaluation, there was one thing that I thought was repetitive. So F, preservation required to the maximum extent practicable. And then G, minimum 90% retention within property. So I thought you could just delete F.
I would agree with that. And because I think I have multiple versions of this, I'm just going to highlight that, come back to it. And that may repeat in these subsections as well, but I'll check for that. One quibble I do have that I'll talk to John about as well, unless you have strong feelings about it. Specimen tree protection standards, specimen vegetation, including heritage trees, shall not be removed from any lot or tract except where such removal is essential to eliminate hazardous conditions. Specimen trees and heritage trees to be retained shall be credited toward any tree replacement required by the salvo. I don't think that saving a special tree should make you replace
Or get
at a,
poor or whatever.
yeah,
They should have to keep, yeah.
I agree.
okay. All right, I will note that then.
Under forest and tree protection standards, disturbance limitations. I flagged letter E, which I think is saying that. So let me just read it again. This was one I had to read a whole bunch of times to figure out what was going on. So disturbance limitation shall be measured based on the extent of the subject forest classification at the time of first submission of applicable applications after the adoption of this section, and shall be indicated on applicable plans or permits. Any disturbance limitation shall run with the land once established. Subsequent applications shall be subject to the initial determination of disturbance limitations. So it's like requiring the township to track any tree disturbance that's happened on a property at the point in time of this ordinance. And I just thought that seemed like a record keeping nightmare. And like, I don't even, is that even feasible?
I actually think this section might be in your existing ordinance.
Oh, really?
I'm not positive. I think it might be, and I think what this is trying to get at is if a property is subdivided at one point, but maybe it's not subdivided to its maximum extent, and then comes back for another subdivision, say in 10 years, the initial plan that sets protection standards stays in place. They don't get to redo their calculations. I agree, it's not very clear. I think that's what this is getting to.
I will say that we do have tools to our advantage. So we do find a lot of data through various sources that we can figure out what has been transpired on the property over time. We also have with the new like permit system that they have, the record keeping going forward is a lot better. So, you know, there's some historic things that obviously you're gonna miss, but we do have some tools that we go back for and can really pull from. And see what people have done over the years.
I think it's important for that, if you subdivide a plot and then come in and subdivide it again and again and again, you're gonna lose a lot of what you tried to avoid in the first place.
Right.
I've seen that somewhere again.
Yeah.
And
It's like a master plan versus a phased plan. And then, so the way stormwater is run, it's cumulative. Every time you do it the same way. Agricultural land is treated the same way. It's 10% of the whole of the entire original lot. Then you're allowed to break off individual pieces at a time. But they maintain that original lot. That's a deed restriction. You know, the agricultural protections are deed restrictions. So there are ways to enforce those. There are things. So that one's not that hard, I think, to really enforce, as they all said.
That's impressive.
I won't say my tools out loud, but I'll show them to you if you'd like.
So this is more that
My way back
may
machine.
actually be in your existing ordinance. It's more descriptions of
Yeah.
what should be conserved. Then we get into riparian buffers.
In number 3, guidelines for disturbance, when determining where permitted forest disturbance will occur, the following factors will be considered. And it kind of reminded me of the 4-step design process, and I didn't know if like we should be referring to that, or if this should be incorporated into that. I don't know, it just seems like a separate consideration process that's similar.
I like that thought.
Well, I think we have to enforce the 4-step design process.
Yeah.
And if we do, then we maybe not have to have all this explicit stuff, but does it hurt?
All right, I've made that note. Are we ready to move to riparian buffers?
Yeah, I noticed you changed them to 150 feet.
I did.
So is that allowed? I mean, I think it's a rate. Can we do that?
I believe we can.
And if you do, you would.
Yeah, I believe we
I don't think
can.
it matters that much because most of our streams are high quality and exceptional value anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, so you pretty much just explained the gist of the section. We've expanded riparian buffers to 150 feet. We've kept the 2-zone approach that was recommended, I think, by Michelle, maybe John, or maybe both.
I think this came before.
Okay. We have put limits on disturbance of what you're permitted to do. More information about maintaining the buffers, submitting management plans.
This is something I flagged to talk about in our meeting, so. This isn't zoning, so it would impact everybody. And this is a case where. I think, like. You know, we were talking about if you're doing something on your property, then that would trigger zoning, but everything else is kind of grandfathered. But this feels a little bit different, so maintaining the riparian buffer vegetation, if currently wooded, the riparian buffer shall be maintained as woodland. In places where the riparian buffer is not wooded, and until such buffers have become wooded, the buffer shall be maintained as a filter or dense grass and forbs with other methods to provide sediment filtering and nutrient uptake, as well as to convert concentrated flow to uniform shallow sheet flow. So that would make the township potentially have to enforce like how people were maintaining their yard or their farm, I guess.
Would this apply to existing if you're not doing anything?
Well, like, what if you're mowing up to the stream bank and your neighbors with Michelle Adams?
But I don't have this much buffer, and if you reforest everything, you lose the bob turtles, so I'm just, no, these are the things that'll come up.
That is a good point about how do you enforce it after a certain period of time? Or like a new development's easy to enforce, but
Yeah.
if you put this in place and then turn around and said your house is 100 feet from a riparian buffer, then how would you, like, it does open a can of worms unless you put in a Cinderella clause, you know, as to when it expires, when it starts. Sorry.
It's important that the buffers be there, and there are so many landowners that don't know anything about it, and they go right up to the stream. And this is more, I can understand we can't go around enforcing it, I mean, our property here, it doesn't have it either.
Right.
Or next door, or, you know, a lot of places, but if we could educate somehow, then that's not related to this at all, but if we could keep that in mind, that's a very important thing to do, is to educate the residents as to how they. And there are a lot of residents that ask, how do I take care of my buffer, what can I do?
Yes.
So maybe we should make a pamphlet or a book.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think the way to say it is that a new development could not go within 150 feet. Like, 'cause if you wanted to put a new shed in or new driveway with someone, you would have to maintain that 150 feet. It's the definition of how you want them to maintain it would fall under operations and maintenance. And would be something that you would, if you do a stormwater system, then you can enforce an operations and maintenance on a homeowner or an HOA or vice versa, you know, any kind of developer. But without that operations and maintenance, I'm not sure you have the ability to tell them how to maintain. But that operation and maintenance only comes into play when you have stormwater systems currently.
Well, it was just a comment that every old house in the township pre-industrial age is gonna be in a riparian buffer.
Absolutely.
Because they've had to have a hand dug well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even some of your newer neighborhoods
Yeah.
even some of your newer neighborhoods have homes within 100 feet of a riparian buffer.
Right.
So. Right, well, they didn't have to, yeah.
Well, number 5, the next section specifically points to applicants for subdivision and land development. If we're concerned about number 4 being too prescriptive for existing landowners, we could sort of scrap number 4, take the intent of number 4 and roll it into number 5 so that it applies only to new applications. Because it is about, like Mike said, it's really just about maintaining your grass versus taller grass versus trees.
That might make sense because Haley's not gonna come out and cite mine the newer management system in the riparian buffer, but somebody in the future might.
You just told her about it.
Yeah, that nighttime stuff.
It's a good.
It has to be, not to call you out now. Sorry.
Should be out there tomorrow morning.
Yeah, this is the first time.
Because we have so many agricultural properties that are going, and others that are gonna have trouble with this maintaining, they're there. It wouldn't make sense.
Okay. All right, I think I know what to do with that. Were there any other questions about riparian buffers? All right.
So we're really just gonna let the 150 be all
Yeah.
I don't. have it. I did, but we've been.
So next, we're into site protection standards and calculations. This first few sections are sort of about what needs to be on the plans, how to delineate the natural resources, make sure that applicants are showing everything.
Should C include a backup on sewage system location?
That's required by the Board of Health. You have to have an alternate site, so in order to get Board of Health approval or Department of Health approval, they would need to have a system in an alternate location. So by making them have the sewer approval, they would have both.
Can we reference that in the code to say you must give Board of Health approval?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
yes.
We have some comments, Rick, here by the table.
Hang on 2 seconds. Oh. All right, so then the table, sort of where the rubber hits the road on everything we've talked about tonight. This table sets all of the resource protection ratios. So in short, you can't, a developer or well, I guess no, I guess this really is just developers can't disturb a floodplain, can only disturb a little bit of steep slopes, 30% and 15% of very steep, can't touch wetlands, can't touch wetland buffer, which that may need to
That's what
be
we changed,
changed, yeah.
It was 80%.
Yeah, it was.
Well, we're going with this. Well, it says you can't graduate. Oh.
Okay. And so when a developer comes in, they have to do these calculations, they have to measure everything. Then that sets their developable area and helps set density and how much they can build. So my questions about this are that, one, it may be difficult. The timing of figuring out the grades of forest could be difficult for this process. That's going to mean that a developer is going to have to do that way up front, which is fine. I just imagine that the first few that come through are going to have difficulties navigating that. And the staff and consultants and commission will have to help them navigate that.
For your riparian buffer, shouldn't zone 1 be 50 feet?
Yes, it should. Thank you.
And I was wondering, so you're using the term base site area. And I was wondering if that should be defined, or we also use the term net tract area. And I can't recall if that's something different, but maybe call this net tract area.
Yeah.
Or define base site area.
I agree. It should be changed, I think, to net. But I also need to double check to make sure that's probably defined, so make sure that works.
Yes, but I feel like there's a problem with the definition. Identified.
Well, we just didn't have it. There wasn't any net track.
Oh, there wasn't?
So yeah, this is a first. We had it for housing, residential, but not.
Oh.
So this whole chart, I believe, was taken from Kennett Township as the precedent. So it's in place there. So I'm fairly confident that it should work in practice here as well. My comments, I think because East Vincent will have a grade 1 forest definition that includes riparian buffers in forests. Oh, wait a second. Never mind, because a riparian buffer isn't necessarily forested.
No.
Take that out of there. The different grades I mentioned. So then my bigger question that I think I actually answered in reviewing this earlier today was what happens to the total protected land? For instance, if a chunk of woodlands is required to be protected, if it's in a subdivision that doesn't require open space, are we okay with protected woodlands ending up in people's backyards? Your ordinance does have other sections further down that describe methods of ensuring conservation of those woodlands. I don't remember specifically if it was deed restrictions or covenants or whatever. But basically an approved plan that shows a resource required to be protected on a private property is supposed to stay protected. I've seen this kind of ordinance in practice, and you really just you don't know what's happening in people's backyards. So this is again, it's a really good start, but this is the kind of bigger picture issue that you may want to come back to after we get this part through.
Well, I think the idea was that when you figure out the utilities of the plot, the way it's set up now, you don't net out anything. And this way that's being netted out, so it's more you get less per.
Less developable area. Less developable
Yeah,
area.
So that was nowhere in that is nowhere in our ordinance now. To take those. Yeah, to allow, in other words, if you just got your gross tract area and 30% can be impervious. Well, if you brought that gross net area back to a net tract area, it would be less, they wouldn't be able to have as much pervious.
I think maybe though,
Or impervious.
even if they do that, though, these protected features could end up on private parcels, right? That's the
Yeah.
problem. So how do you then protect them when they're on private parcels and they want to put their swing set there?
Yeah, I was previously a consultant in Montgomery Township, Montgomery County. And they did this all the time. They protected woodlands. They ended up in backyards. And, I'd come out for the end of the 18-month guarantee period inspection and peek over a fence and see that what was a woodland was now a few trees with grass under it.
Yeah.
And, the township wasn't going to require all of these homeowners to reforest their new Toll Brothers backyards.
It's development near you and I, Lawson on Berlin School Road. I still have the plans and all that open space around the ponds, and I promise you that when I went back there and walked around, people would come back and tell us we're in the yard.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
So again, it's a point of discussion for if you
Yeah.
want to go even further with some of this stuff.
And so just bringing up this chart, because this chart is what we analyzed this chart versus some of the other developments. So just a 150-foot riparian buffer would have taken at Washington Square, for example, would have made it so that there were 137. So the 137 were approved before, and it would only go down to 124. So it would have only changed Washington Square by 14, 13 houses. However, at Magnolia, it would have reduced it by close to like 80.
At
Wow.
how many?
Wow.
Yeah, like, so they could have had a 536 total, but they, with this 150, it would have dropped to 416. Right? I don't think they built that many, but the point is that they could have.
So that was a more natural resource rich site of
Exactly.
development.
So it's just to look at the two comparatively, right? One was a kind of an infill project and the other one was this, a farm field that had a lot of natural features. So the impact of that 150 is quite large.
But that should have applied anyway because of the chapter 102 requirements.
It was 100, right, versus 150. But again, there's other things in that too, in this chart too. It reduces the area to Elaine's point about the impervious cover and so on. Right, so you start netting out steep slopes, you start netting out those things, which reduce your density calculation.
No, I understand, but Elaine was saying that every stream in East Vincent is an EV or HQ stream.
Not every,
Not every-
Most of them are.
most of them.
I think he's quoting. So I guess that one wasn't.
So there are a lot of waterways that are not,
Only random.
there are a lot of waterways that are not EV or HQ. They're waterways, but they're not mapped waterways, or they're unnamed tributaries. There's a lot of different like situations. But either way, it's just looking at those plans, like those are just two quick examples. So I think that this chart is a great way, moving in the right direction as you all want to be. But I just was showing you the difference of if you're trying to stop this or if you're trying to stop this, look at the difference between the two.
It does, but like you're saying, though, like it will help us identify where there are more significant natural resource impacts with a project as opposed to less.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It's-
I mean-
that is valuable.
Right, but it just, and Washington Square is much more dense than Magnolia, but at the same time, the impact would have been more on Magnolia than Washington Square.
All right, are we relatively happy with the chart?
Yeah.
No, that's good.
All right, so if we keep moving.
I wanted to flag number 3. I'm not sure what page you're on. 1507. It's the page after the chart. Continued protection of identified natural resources.
Yeah, this was what I was alluding to, declaration of covenants, easements, restrictions. But go ahead.
Yeah, so, to ensure the continued protection of identified natural resources, the following requirements shall apply. Protected resource areas on individual lots. For resource protected areas on individual lots, so like if there's a development and there's a subdivision and some of those protected woodlands or wetland buffers end up on people's lots. Restrictions meeting township specifications shall be placed in the declaration of covenants, easements, and restrictions, showing sites and or lots that have resource protection areas within their boundaries. So this seems to only apply if there's like a development, like an HOA kind of thing, that's gonna have these
Right.
covenants, easements, and restrictions. So if there's like a farm and it subdivides into 2 lots, and one of the lots is gonna stay the farm property and one's gonna be the property that's got the stream and the woodland on it. It wouldn't apply. It only applies if there's like a development.
I think it would apply to a new subdivision. The subdivision would be the development that would push it into that. That's occurring a lot where somebody takes their farm and divides it in half and says, I want to create a developable lot. We have to make sure that that lot's before you can create a lot, it has to have sewer approval, it has to have all these, has to be considered viable. There's actually one going through the process right now that will be coming to you all in the next probably month or two. Right, and that's exactly what happened. They're subdividing off a piece of their property to put a home on it, but they have to make sure that they can actually make it a viable lot before meet all these other requirements. before we could approve a lot line change. So I think that those covenants could exist or could come into play on a situation like that. But to your point, you're right, is that the standalone farmland that is standing there, those covenants would not apply.
And if you think this is too restrictive for that situation, the farmer cutting off a lot for a child, we could write this to apply to a major subdivision. Do you have do you have definition for major and minor?
Yeah,
Mhm.
they do.
I'm not sure what that
Actually, it's
is,
not
but I
major and
could-
minor, it's like, you call it something else, so.
Maybe do all major and minor.
Okay.
Wait.
Anybody have any problem? I'm actually getting a little spicy with it. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
No, I just. Thanks.
Well, the good news is, I think,
That's about it.
I think this is it for zoning,
Hang on.
Yeah,
aside from maybe some renumbering.
yeah, we made it.
Answer your question.
Well, I raised the concern and
Yeah, we did it.
nobody else seems to have the concern, so that's fine. We'll leave it in there. It's not even really a big concern of mine. I just flagged it as like a private property rights thing.
No, fair point.
So,
Seems like a long evening, but that's actually a lot. We got a lot done.
so does that mean we want to see this album for the next one?
Are there questions in this Aldo, or did you just make this Aldo so it conforms to this?
It was a lot less than something, but.
I'd kind of like to, get this moving.
Well, I could ask all of you if you had specific questions or concerns about the Saldo, if you did get a chance to review it. Definitions should be pretty much the same as zoning. We've talked through all that already. Should be, if I did a good job.
The definitions, I would think are pretty much the same. That's what you went through and did, right?
Should be, yep.
Is there a component we miss on enforcement of these? Do we need to have something as an enforcement, so if someone doesn't do this, there are penalties associated with this?
I think penalties is a solicitor question, probably.
We'll try to do that.
Flagged, for the woodland, natural and historic features protection,
Do you have a section number?
22,429. So on the second page of content for that, so there's limitations to woodland disturbance. Which I think was previously like walking back the zoning requirements and allowing you to disturb more than zoning allowed you to, so that got taken out, and that's good. But I was kind of feeling like, do any of those limitations to woodland disturbance need to be in there? Like, could that just get wholesale deleted? And just have the tree replacement. Like delete everything before letter B. Which seems like a lot to delete. It probably has a purpose, but. So the sections that would be are about. So there's a section on conservation of forest, hedgerows, individual trees, heritage trees, and specimen vegetations. But we have that in zoning
Mhm.
now. Then there's limitations to woodland disturbance. So there's pre-construction, post-construction inspections to make sure that they're only removing the stuff they say they're gonna remove. You have to make reasonable efforts to harmonize your plans with preservation of existing trees, but we've got all those qualifiers of what the applicant should be looking at when they're prioritizing which trees to keep in zoning.
Mhm.
No specimen vegetation or heritage tree shall be removed, that's in zoning. Forest replacement. Only applies if you're disturbing more than 20,000 square feet or 25% of a wooded area. So that's new, but that could go in the replacement standards part, in letter D. Forest shall be prioritized for protection based on its grade, which is in zoning, and there's very clear standards for that. And then there's criteria for preserving or removal, and that's also in zoning.
I'm not ready to just delete all 4
Yeah.
pages right now, but I tend to agree with you. It is much cleaner, simpler to just let the zoning ordinance, let the chart, let those descriptions govern.
That's for us to trip up on our ordinances and some.
True. So everything that you just suggested, getting rid of. Some things do need to stay, like you mentioned, the inspections. Now, when we get to this section, tree protection fence, etc., this stuff is important for when the developer does get to construction. But then really the meat of this section is the required vegetation replacement. And this section also is prepared as a guidance document by the arborist, and I had to turn it into an ordinance. It's pretty thorough. It's a pretty good ordinance, I think. And it's really, especially when you look at class 1, this is talking about for every, it's a 4-to-1 replacement. 4 inches go in for every 1 inch removed. So this is a big obstacle to a developer wanting to remove a high quality forest.
It's great.
Yeah, it's
It
really.
is.
I'll never plant all the
No.
trees. Yes, please leave it in.
I think it's great. Sure, come on up.
Hi, Joanna, 10 New Street. I just had a question because I'm really not familiar with trees too much. I have beautiful trees in my yard, but I don't know like anything about them. So when the replacement trees come in, is it saplings or is it like mature trees? Does it specify? Because I know there is a difference, but I just.
Yeah, no,
I'm unsure.
the next section requires minimum 2.5 inch caliper
Okay.
nursery grown trees meeting quality standards. Now, I will say that this sets a standard, but I've worked with our township arborist in a different community where they had so many replacement trees, they were basically recreating a new forest. And we worked together to come up with sort of slightly different standards, that they did plant saplings, but they planted a ton more saplings because it just made more sense to grow smaller trees than bigger trees. So this sets a real solid standard. But I would say that there could be cases where the consultants and staff and planning commission agree that a slightly different approach may make more sense.
Right. I was just curious because, like saplings, like I wonder what their survival rate is versus like a more mature tree. And I have no idea what 2.5 caliber means.
It means it's about that.
Well, I know that, but is it a specifying
Parking
for-
lot that was just built and there's trees in the parking lot. That's probably similar, like maybe
Okay.
12 to 16 feet tall or something, that's that right?
Like depending on the type of tree or something.
Yeah, saplings actually survive better because
They
they're
are.
less vulnerable to being transplanted. Transplanting a bigger tree, and I'm not an arborist, but there's too much shock to the tree and there's more mortality. So the little trees often do better.
I would just ask Mike and Bob, please think of my neighborhood and the size of the trees and the failure rate, and that's like a very good example for everyone to be aware of.
Were they like 2.5 inches or?
Yeah, they were probably they might even have been 1.5 to 2 inch. But yeah, no, a lot of those trees, and then just at sheer volume, for example, that property, I think it was like 2,000 trees. So just imagine 2,000 trees being harvested at once, and the failure rate was astronomical.
Failure rate was because of the way they were stored and installed.
Stalled and stored,
That's the problem.
On for smaller,
right?
than the dead ones that are bigger now.
Yeah.
Do we have a law? Does John have a guarantee? Because that's something
Mhm.
arborists have done.
Yes.
I think it's 18 months.
But I've seen 5 years and I've seen ordinances, I would defer to John on this. If you have a limit of protection and you're in the root zone and existing trees die within 5 years, you're responsible.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that answers my other question.
Yes.
Yeah,
All right.
sorry, and thank you for explaining that.
The other thing is that I'm glad this came up. Is there something that a major mistake was made in Magnolia Reserve where trees were planted as part of landscape around the homes? Where there's a tree that's actually gonna grow probably a trunk of, could be 5 feet. Should not be planted next to the foundation of the home.
Right.
I mean, it's that review process. I mean, it failed that process there. So
Yeah.
we should use that example that actually there's gotta be some type of review of the trees, because again, too, when it was approved, there was a problem there was this long list of trees. And the selection they made was least expensive. And it shows.
Yeah.
So it's gotta be where I think as part of this, I think John's working on this, to come up with an approved tree list where, okay, these trees are gonna survive.
Yeah.
So, and that too is part of that maintenance.
So to Bob, to your point, so there's a set number of trees that are required
Yes.
for street trees, for whatever, and then there's on-lot trees. And the on-lot trees say that there has to be, I believe it's 2 trees and 1 shrub per home, or vice versa. I did it maybe backwards, but either way, those trees never show up on any plan. The developer puts them wherever they want. And that's what was going on. They put them in locations that were less than ideal. But they were not subject to any reviews and so on. So we might need to look into that piece to try to see if we can designate where they put them.
Absolutely, because there's one home I can recall. I think the tree has a height of 75 feet.
Yeah.
That is planted probably less than 3 feet from the foundation of the home.
Yeah, I believe the residential
It's
code
one that's like,
refers to them as on-lot trees.
Isn't that something that consultants and the planning commission review? I mean, isn't that put on the plans, where the trees are going to go?
So these on-lot trees were not. So the street trees were, and then there's this provision that, I don't forget the ratio, but I believe it's either it's 1 tree and 2 shrubs, or it's 2 trees and X number of shrubs. They're called on-lot trees, and those are never depicted as the way they went. The developer put them in, basically asked the homeowner, where do you want it? And the homeowner, if a homeowner said, put it up against the foundation, they did. Not knowing,
we changed that to get that.
I think that we have to make them,
Be reviewed.
I think we have to make it so that they're depicted on the plan, on the approved landscape plan.
The houses get built where the houses are shown to be built?
Sometimes, yeah. So I put that on the plan too. Please build the house where it's supposed to
You
be.
got one of the changes that we made, started here, is verifying that the as-bills. Because the problem is they did not submit as-bills. And in just, you can visually look and see, the grade is wrong.
Yeah.
And what was happening is they were just being signed off on the tomatoes. And this is when we had an issue with the solicitors. Well, how do you hold these people accountable? Somehow you have to go on. If an engineer signs that's the as-built, all you did is you looked at the same exact plan. That's wrong. So, and at the end of the day, you walk away Who's responsible? The homeowner has to deal with that.
Right.
I think that's part of our obligation to make sure that as it's built, that's what's reflected.
We're doing it now.
Yeah. We are.
Riverston hates us.
Mhm.
Okay. The only other changes to Saldo are a few changes that are essentially changing applicants strongly encourage to applicant shall, providing invasive species management planning.
Mm.
And there's another section, similar change about forest management planning.
Rick, how long does that go, that management plan? How long does that, can you stipulate that length of time or no? I mean, is that like an overkill to something to say that management plan, or is that an ongoing?
So, I mean, I think that this comes to another issue of what you want to stipulate versus what you as a township staff want to continue to monitor.
Okay.
I mean, I think that all of the management plans should get tied to HOA documents,
Okay.
assuming that there's going to be an HOA.
Yeah, that's great.
And then, it's up to you how much you want to keep up with the HOAs. I know, some townships are like, once it's in the HOA's hand, it's their problem. Some townships meet with their HOAs every year. I know you're busy.
But I think also too, as part of it is, by this management plan, we have some HOAs right now. Their basins have now become a forest.
Mhm.
And it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I think as part of this plan, to stay up in front of it. Because now you're talking some serious expense for that HOA, to be able to restore that back to what it was supposed to function as a detention basin.
Yeah, I would say so. The management overall is the operations and maintenance for HOAs and so on. That operations and maintenance plan. So other municipalities require you to do two different ways. Every April 1st, for the record, Tredyffrin Township, right? You have to do every commercial developer has to provide a report and an inspection report of their systems every April 1st. And then they're fined if they don't, a month afterwards. East Whiteland does it where East Whiteland makes you escrow it for 5 years. And as the consultants go do those inspections for 5 years, and then the same process. But after 5 years, they don't do anything. But in the idea is that the HOA would be trained in 5 years to be able to take that on. But Tredyffrin though does the opposite. So Tredyffrin makes it the homeowner's responsibility and the developer's responsibility. For every basin after 2019 needs to be maintained every April and inspected and reported on by every April 1st. So, but those provisions are not in your ordinances anywhere. But that is a way that you could choose to enforce and so on. And that's what we've been doing a lot of work with EAC is to try to figure out what HOAs and so on have basins and have these provisions in place because a lot of them predated 2019.
So you're gonna work with Greg to write that up?
Well, that's a stormwater whole piece that I think I don't think something that you've even probably thought about yet.
No.
So I think when you get to the stormwater ordinance, because that's also will be an enforcement, we had to bring Joe in on this one. To where it goes. And then in theory, you could only do it on HOAs that are established as of now.
But you could put that on new development
Yes,
that has an HOA, they would know upfront as part of that.
that
The
absolutely.
EDC is looking at doing an educational component, for this, like almost HOA 101.
Mhm.
Here's what your responsibilities are, here's what stormwater management, all of that stuff,
Right.
so.
The hard part with HOAs is the members change.
You train one, you train a group, and then what happens is they raise the rates because they need now more money and then they get voted out. And then, so then you train the next group.
Well, that's why you have it every year.
So,
Here we go.
So where would that go?
so it's in their stormwater ordinance that it's a mandatory like reporting process, and it's in their operations and maintenance reports as well. Operations and maintenance plans. So going forward, they would be recorded in their operations and maintenance.
So do we have any plans of updating that ordinance? I haven't heard any.
Or yes, we have. I think with the planning commission building is work that's been needed for a long time,
Yeah.
so.
By the enforcement.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
That one gets a little easier. I mean, what is it? There's like 19 HOAs.
Yeah.
There's 19
That's
HOAs
correct.
in the township. So.
So you made it through, right?
Did everyone make it?
I think so. So, like, is it premature to vote to pass this off to the board pending the changes that Rick is gonna make and work with Michael on?
I would love to do it,
Yeah.
because I think the quicker we get this in, the better.
Because I don't think we need to see it again.
Yeah, I don't think there's any precedent. in it.
Do you?
I mean, I think you did a great job.
Yeah.
Well, then, thanks everybody who contributed. But does the commission need this in a format prepared by the solicitor as a more proper amendment with whereases and heretofores?
We have to wait to vote until we get it in the proper format.
No, I thought you go, they could send it to the solicitor now.
Yeah, and then maybe it's the condition on you making those changes and Joe adding the legalese.
Yeah, right.
And then to the board. Yeah.
If we need to review it before first.
Yeah, so-
Yeah.
Well, we can give another approval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they want to.
Can we do one more public comment?
Yeah.
Monica Scriver, Valley Creek Lane. First of all, I wanted to go back to when you were talking about floodplains. And isn't there it's a 500-year floodplain plan now? It's not just 100.
Yeah, the 500-year exists on FEMA, but on some properties, not on others. And then it's really a 100, and then areas outside the 500. It's kind of a weird scenario, but it's not really enforced
So
or reversed.
Not Monica, because a lot of ordinances for their floodplains reference certain codes, and they reference American Society of Civil Engineers ASC 24, which is a code for how you build structures to be resilient to flooding. Just last year in 2025, they recommended that all buildings be built to a 500-year standard, not a 100-year standard. So that's something to think about. We don't have a lot of that, but
Yeah, and
something
then
to think about.
they added the flash flood one too, right? They
Yeah,
added the flash
yeah.
flood line. The flash flood line is I think a lot of what we, like you referred to as like a summer storm, like those high intensity, short durations.
The reason I bring it up is that the National Floodplain Insurance Program, there's a guide from June 2025, maybe this is when that came out. And they basically are telling municipalities they may elect to develop ordinances, regulations, and policies that exceed their NFIP minimum requirements because of emergency management with floodplains. Because we're experiencing more and more. And Bob brought this up with the slopes, and I just want to reiterate it. With the percentages you decide to choose, like anything with slopes should reflect that stormwater management. It should be linked. So when you're talking about percentages, I think it's key that you keep that in mind, what he pointed out. I like the tree list. I liked our soils list. We had a list of soils, and I know there's somewhere you can go and look at the soils and see what they are, but we used to have a list of soils. I guess it wasn't a section. It's not there anymore. Do you remember it, Lisa?
It's
Well,
in,
there was just the names were all wrong.
it's still there. So it's under hydric soils. It's under hydric soils, and then there's an inclusions list, but the abbreviations and names needed to be updated.
Okay. I'm sorry, are you guys?
That's fine.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I
No.
wanted to say hedgerows, Rick, this is for you.
Hmm.
Are there natural forming hedgerows?
I mean, what's, what's natural?
Well, you're
I
like,
mean, they
so that
follow,
answers my question.
yeah,
I just always assumed that there were hedgerows that formed just, things started sprouting and growing together and
they
creating.
usually, you know, they follow usually some human-made feature, a wall, a fence.
Yeah, I always find it, I'm sorry if you don't mind, I always find that hedgerows kind of become pseudo there because somebody's maintaining this side and somebody's maintaining this side and it just leaves a strip between, you know, and then that's where the vegetation forms and goes from there. Or if somebody puts it up on purpose to divide their property from their neighbors.
Or the farmers planted in the 30s.
Yeah.
Right?
No, offense, but then.
And then my final comment was, I heard somebody say, what are we trying to stop? And I think we have to change that language because it's not what we're trying to stop, it's what we're trying to protect. And what a brain trust we have up here, and it's so nice to have you, Rick. And I look forward to having you here in, you know, future meetings for your expertise. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the decision made to have you be part of all this. Thank you.
I just want to say one thing about the tree list, and this was a Molly comment, that she mentioned that, are we sure that there aren't trees on here that are getting blight now, like each tree and that?
You're right, and I noticed that today, this is a list I prepared just 3 or 4 years ago, and it's already outdated.
Yes.
The beeches should come off, the hemlocks should come off. I don't think ash are on
I
there
just lost
anymore,
the
but
hemlock
Ash has done that too.
yesterday in that storm, and it's on top of an elm. It's just a
Mhm.
big mess now.
You want to replace those with coconut trees.
Yeah.
well, that the tree list that I provided to you all was really meant to be an example. I would certainly want John to add, delete,
Okay.
run through that too.
Any comment online?
Nothing online.
Move to approve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend this ordinance to the Board of Supervisors as amended by Natural Lands and Panoni. And as reviewed by our solicitor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Hooray! In like 5 years. Sad but true. So there's one more thing on the agenda, but I'm gonna skip it because Michelle's tired. So the only thing I'll say is that, so this year, we really want to have a big push to update the zoning ordinance, and this was the first step in that, which was really amazing. And I had sent around, a potential process that Lawson and I talked about. The first page is specific things in the ordinance that we think require like this level of conversation that we had tonight. So just to kind of back up, 2 years ago, we worked with the County Planning Commission to update the zoning ordinance. We have a full draft. And so we're not starting from scratch, we're starting from that draft. But there were some things that still needed to be reviewed and that the public needs to weigh in on without having to go through the entire ordinance, like the administration section and how the zoning hearing board works and that sort of thing. Because a lot of those things are mandated at the state level and not something we have a ton of control over. So that's what's on the first page is some ideas of things that we might want to look at more closely. And it's kind of a big list. And then the second page is a potential process that we could use to actually make it happen. So one idea that I had is having like a zoning 101 discussion to try to get people from the township who don't often come to meetings or who do come to meetings in which they knew more about how zoning worked. And just have sort of like an info session on what zoning is, how it works, how it's administered, what it applies to, what you can and can't regulate in zoning, that kind of thing. So that people feel more confident in coming to workshops and offering their opinion about some of these things that could impact them and their property. And then that we could each sort of like split up these topics and each become an expert on one or more of these. And that we would kind of go through the section, come up with any comments that we have and sort of facilitate the comments, our comments and a discussion with the planning commission. And then also, when we're having these public workshops where we're getting people's input on these things, like there might be tables set up throughout the room where you're different stations where you're talking about a different topic. And so that person who really got to understand that topic would sort of be manning that station and getting public input about that topic. And then we could kind of take all of that back and talk about it at the planning commission, make any edits to the county version of the ordinance that we wanted to. And then probably approve or send the whole thing to the board in one fell swoop, but maybe there's things we want to do earlier than that and not wait. So, I think it's, right now I'm just introducing this idea and definitely open to a better way to do it that is, more expedient to get what we want, but maybe at the next meeting, not the special meeting, we can kind of talk through some of these things and come up with more of a final process. But I just didn't want us to leave tonight before I could explain that so that you could be thinking about it for next time.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of nice comments in here.
And Rick, I'd love your thoughts on this too.
Yeah, I like the idea of being more proactive about zoning, which is not always the most interesting, amazing topic to talk about for 2 hours. But for like a presentation where you asked if I could be part of it, I think it would be great to have like me, somebody from the county, and somebody from planning commission or zoning hearing board, so that it's sort of from multiple levels, multiple points of view.
That's true.
Well, I mean, the zoning is so important. It's what every development or every plan that comes in has to satisfy. So it's really important. I just wanted to say that the courts made a decision on the Ruth Farm and are upheld what the board.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that unless they take it to so that was the common one. Yes, that's interesting. And it was all on the zoning, the density.
I think this idea of engaging people and helping them understand is fabulous.
It also might be a way to get more people to engage. You guys are awesome for coming, sitting through 2 hours of zoning talk.
Let's care.
Yeah.
I don't think enough people know to care. I don't think they know anything about it.
Or feel that they're empowered.
Anything you want to add?
No, I think it's great to introduce this. Let's do some thinking about it and chat next time we meet on April 21st.
That sounds like an invitation for a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
Oh. We skip public comment on anything at all.
Hi, Joanna, 10 New Street. So 2 questions. One is, was there a date set for the special meeting yet, or we're still deciding because Easter is coming up and spring break?
April 9th. 6:13.
April 9th. Okay, thank you. I couldn't heard. I heard the Monday and then. Yeah, okay, and then the other question is, well, it's kind of like, I guess, a comment. I like the idea of really involving everybody and like putting it out there about the ordinances and things, because there's a lot of people that don't understand. I am one of them, just learning about all of it. The only thing that I guess I would say is that there's a bunch of tables set up. And, you know, like say like there's 6 tables, right? So you're only allowed, well, not allowed, sorry, allowed, I'll say allowed, whatever. To be involved in like one table, but what if you wanna hear about the other discussion?
No, you start here.
Oh, okay, so the people that are at the table, like this gentleman here, he has to repeat that like 6 times?
It's fine.
I'm just curious.
That's how it works.
But then what about if someone has a question that you wouldn't think of or something, then it kind of like. You know, the broad discussion isn't there, but it's like a bunch of mini discussions, but what if there's other information that you might have missed? Because it was in like the group before you or group
Well,
after.
after the workshop, the synthesized input was brought back here and here.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure, so I was just curious of how that kind of worked, if you wanted to listen to everything going on.
If the intent were to let the public chat with each other about these topics, we would set it up differently, but the intent is to get the public to share their comments with the planning commission, so we can incorporate that in our, but I hear what you're saying, but
Okay.
maybe this will all result in like a zoning related like discussion group that you all set up amongst each other, just chat about zoning for fun.
We do, trust me, we do that already. Oh, my last, I forgot. Oh, is the document that you were discussing with, what potentially is gonna be at these tables, is that available online? Or is it not yet, or it won't be until time off, just curious.
No, it's just for us at the moment.
Oh, okay. So will it be available online or will it be available when the tables are set up?
Or you'll hear the discussion at the next meeting, and then you'll hear the topics.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about it today, we just talked about the fact that we're gonna talk about it.
Okay,
The concept.
gotcha. Thank you, I appreciate it.
It's not cool. I have just one quick question.
Sorry. Monica Scriver, Valley Creek Lane. The document we're talking about is the one that was here a year ago. It's all red marked. So is that not on our website somewhere for people to access?
You're talking about
The
the
rewrite.
We're talking about, he was talking
The
about.
rewrite is.
For the.
Round
workshop-
tables.
For the workshop roundtable,
Okay.
that's not available.
Is that document that was redlined last year on our website?
The rewrite,
Yeah,
yes.
where can we? find
It should be under ongoing projects.
that? Okay,
It's further down.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
since it's older.
So, what are we hearing about, starting the process again with the data center ordinance?
hearing
Hearing about it?
Any word?
Mm-mm.
So we're not gonna look at writing another ordinance?
Not at this point.
Okay, I just was looking for an update. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay,
Let's move to adjourn.
all in favor?
Nice job.
Yeah.